All right, hi everybody. Wow, look at this great turnout. This is our last session together, and I'm sad about that. And I imagine you are too, and just wish it would go on forever. No, I know you don't. So that's fine. Wanted to welcome everybody. I want to introduce one person. And some of you met Arthur Samuelson, who was the, I forget his exact title, but program coordinator at the Rowe Camp and Conference Center for many years now, right? Hillary, maybe 10 years, 15 years, something like that. And he is retiring, I think. So well done him. And he's being, his place is being taken and revamped and redone by Max. And Max, I've forgotten your last name. I'm sorry.
McBride.
McBride.
Yep.
And Max is joining us today. So you just want to wave at everybody? Welcome. Welcome. Yeah, we know you'll love it there at Rowe. So. All right. So today, and again, a big thanks to Fia for running our technology. So today we're going to look at a couple strategies, particularly legacy giving and the really importance of that. And I think I explained to you early on that because of the size of the baby boomer population, legacy giving is going to be one of the most important strategies in the next probably 10 years, and also carries us through. If you remember the generational change, remember Gen X, which is the generation right behind boomers, is a tiny little generation. And that's what's causing some of our supply chain issues in terms of staffing and board members and things like that. And it will also be causing us problems in terms of donors. And it's the legacy gifts that will probably carry us until we can get to millennials, which is a very large and very generous generation, but younger and kind of coming out in a very economically insecure time and with a lot of debt. So it'll be a while till that generation really gets its stride in terms of being in terms of donations. So before we just dive right in there, I wanted to see if people had any questions, comments, disagreements, stories, whatever left over from any of the sessions, really. Of course, particularly I'm thinking of the last session, and you can type it in the chat or you can raise your hand using the raise hand function and I will call on you. We are a small but mighty generation. I agree. Go Gen X. I agree. Do your best. I feel so bad for you. You are just like sandwiched in between these giant arrogant boomers, these super cute millennials. I don't know. It is not a good place to be. Go us. Okay. So a bunch of Gen X on this. Probably half the Gen X in New England is on this call today. So that's good. So far, we've seen two. All right. Looks like everyone's commenting on Gen X. So I'm going to move on from there. That's not really the big theme of our time. And move into our content for today. And let's see, participants can now see your application. Good. All right. So just want to start with a little reminder that we are not brain surgeons. I mean, we have serious work to do, but we need to lighten up about it a little bit. So I've always found that in the people who are really, when I look around in my years of fundraising, I think that person is really good at fundraising and has also managed to stay in it for a very long time. They're often people who are very, if they're not funny themselves, they love to laugh and they love to have a good time. So I'd say this is a really good piece of advice. I want to give you a chance in small groups again to maybe meet someone new, although, you know, we've had a bunch of breakouts, so maybe you'll see some friends you've made since we've started this session. And just to review your homework, and some of you will recall, one piece of homework was to ask someone for somewhere between $100 and $1,000 as you could, and as you came across people, and you only had a week in which to do that. How did that go? If you didn't do it, was it honestly because you just couldn't, because it wasn't possible, or was there any hesitation? There's no right answer to this or wrong answer, but it's more to kind of look in yourself and see what holds you back from asking for money in person. And then I also asked you to look at your relationship building efforts in your organization. How specifically do you invite people to make their first gift? And we are going to talk more today, but I think with Haley particularly emphasized the importance of using your strategies appropriately. What strategies do you use to get people to go from 0 to 1? They never gave, they make their first gift. What strategies do you use to invite people to give a second time, then a third and a fourth and a fifth time? What strategies do you use to ask people to upgrade? And you kind of see the donor on a trajectory. And here's the thing, donors are either moving closer to your group or they're moving further away, but they are not standing still. And of course, what your job is to keep inviting them to come closer. And one of the ways you do that is by asking people to do stuff besides give money. Even if they never do it, they appreciate that you did ask them. So Fia, can you put us into breakouts? We'll just be a very brief report. Maybe we'll take about 5 minutes for this. Thanks.
I'll be right back.
Oh, George Santos went off all his committees today.
Or he says he did.
He says he did. Right. Right. But he went off him as George Santos, and he's actually another person.
He is unbelievable.
Who is he?
He's got to be in the Guinness Book of World Records for a man most incapable of ever saying one true thing.
But who is he? And most importantly, where'd all that money come from?
Yeah, well, you know, the Republicans, they really have scraped the barrel with him.
From fundraising. Yeah. He did fundraising.
Yeah. I'm recommending him to take over this program now that I'm retiring.
Oh, yeah, that would be good. Well, he's done it already 30 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he used to live at Roe.
He used to be he was the founder of Roe. It's a little known fact.
Yeah.
In his previous life. He's the head of the Unitarians. He's the Pope of the Unitarians. They didn't know he had a Pope, but they do.
We do. And he's,
And he's it. All right, is everybody back? Let's see. What is going on? Okay, perfect. All right, so is anyone willing to share what they, some of what they did or didn't do? Somebody said, who's the UU Pope? We're just joking about George Santos. Don't worry, all the Unitarians all having a fit. There is no Pope of the Unitarians. Don't worry about it. Sorry, we should never joke between sessions.
I'm gonna say, thank God I didn't get that on the MFC interview.
You would have been like, what? Okay, does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, so someone is pointing out there is a bishop. Yeah, it's true, actually, in Europe, I think there's a slightly different system, so thank you.
It's true, they do. They have a bishop, and I was so terrified when I met that bishop, I curtsied.
You curtsied?
I curtsied, and yeah, to which everybody became, yeah, and everybody cracked up.
You didn't know what to ring?
I didn't.
Well,
it was incredible. Yeah,
that was probably a fun thing for him. Okay, so now I'd really like to refocus on the topic at hand, which is your homework. I know you were doing all kinds of things to get out of it, but so one, did anyone have any luck asking someone for money, whether they gave it or not? You went ahead and did it. Just hold your hand up. I won't call. I promise not to call on you, but people did stuff. It's like a few people did things. Well done. Anyone willing to share their experience with that? Oh, Pam, you are? Pam Dorr? Great. Okay, go ahead. Unmute yourself, please.
I had a really interesting week where I met in person with a donor, and one of our community members actually had already asked him for a donation of $2,000. And what he wanted to let me know is that he would like to continue giving at that level in the future as well. But what was more surprising is that he said, you know, I am just a connector. And what I would like to do instead is help you raise 12 to 15 million, just this kind
Wow.
of crazy thing. And he had a project that he wanted to fund, and he sees himself as someone who can convene people of wealth that would like to fund at that level for a specific project he had in mind. And it was just fascinating to sit and talk to him and hear. I went to the meeting wanting to just hear him and be a partner for him, and it just really worked out. He was so warm-hearted and kind, and kind of started the meeting by telling me how his business was not good and he didn't have a ton of money to invest in the affordable housing work that we do, but wanted to be considered for giving $2,000 a year in the future, which was kind of neat to hear, where he sees himself, but also what he could do for us outside of the giving.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was a fun meeting and I left with a very warm heart. He's such a kind person.
Well, it is nice to know that, pretty much, if all goes well, that you have this 2,000 a year that you can count on. That's a really nice commitment. Yeah. Plus, yeah, the introductions of people who could give all that money. That's interesting. Wow. Cool. Good for you. Anyone else?
Janet Jeffrey has her hand up.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm at a small Unitarian church that's typical to most churches, an older congregation. And there's a man who has given every year, but he hasn't pledged for many, many years. And we're just wrapping up our pledge campaign for the year. And he had talked to the president, and he came and talked to me a couple of times about, I started using we have a part-time admin person using her computer when she leaves to send out acknowledgement of pledges and thank yous from last year, to which we got a lot of feedback because it hasn't always been done before. And he came up to me on Sunday and said, "Where's your form? I know I told you I wasn't going to pledge, but I am." And he sat down and he filled it in.
Wow.
It was like, ah. But we actually invited him to on a Zoom finance committee meeting and a couple other things. We're trying to get him more engaged. He's quite elderly, but clearly on the ball. And he hasn't liked the way things have been going, but he really likes the way we're going now. And yeah, it was really one of those, boy, it makes you feel good for doing this.
Yeah. Well, and it shows the importance of connecting with people personally and figuring out and finding out what's holding them back or what's propelling them forward, so you're getting some nice feedback on your new direction. That's great. Tarn.
Yes, this past Friday, I sat in on a fundraising meeting for the local YMCA. The executive director there was the bookkeeper there 20 years ago when I raised $2 million for them. And so he wants me to be on his fundraising committees always. And the reason I bring it up is I was very impressed with how he organized his long lists of all the possible donors, some being companies, many individuals. And he started with the highest possible donations of, over $100,000 or even $500,000. And then he went down to the next levels and worked down till finally the local people who we would reach out to by phone or however in the community without having any idea of their abilities. They would be the ones to go after once we've locked in the major donors early on. And I thought that was interesting because I've always thought starting with local people by knocking on doors and calling them was a good way, but I'm actually very impressed with his his logical approach to trying to get the big donations first.
Yeah. So you're bringing up a really good point. I'll just say it now in case I forget to say it later, that, starting locally is not, there's nothing wrong with that, but actually in general, we do start with the biggest gift first. We call this in fundraising top down, inside out. So who can give the biggest gift, who's closest to your group? Where do those two things come together? Start with that person because you're most likely to get a yes and move on from there. Because you can imagine, let's just take a campaign, let's say, $100,000. And someone comes to me and says, "Kim, we're starting this campaign. The goal is $100,000. Could you help with $1,000?" And I think, well, that's a decent amount of money, but maybe I could. So I say, well, where are you in the campaign? Well, you would be the first gift. look, 1,000 on 100,000, this is a real uphill thing. Very different feeling if you come to me and say, we're looking for 100,000 and we've already raised 50 or 75 or 90. You can just see so much more how your gift propels over the top. And of course, the further down when you come down to $100 gifts or $250 or $50 gifts is very, very important that people feel like, yeah, I really moved the needle. And I think it's always very fun actually to give one of the, like a longtime donor of a sort of a smaller gift, give that person the opportunity to push you over the top and, be like, oh, with you, we got that. We went over the 100,000 thanks to your gift. And sometimes that's fun. It's $100 gift or something that puts it over. So yeah, it does generally. And also some people love to be on the inside track. That is their kind of identity. I'm always ahead of the curve. I'm an early adapter. I'm like, I'm that kind of person. And so they like to be asked for those first gifts. They are risk takers, they fancy themselves as part of their way of being in the world is to take a risk. And so they like to come in with those big gifts. So that was smart. All right. What about your homework? What about kind of looking at your strategies, how you invite your first gift, how you try to keep your donors, how do you try to upgrade them? Did anybody have any insight or run into a problem or have anything you wanted to say about that, what you learned from trying to do that? Marjorie.
Hi. So what I was finding, and I think this is probably similar for a lot of groups, is that we definitely have strategies for that first gift, which I think of as someone kind of identifying themselves as being interested in us. But then what that does is it gets them on our list, and then they're getting the same thing as everyone. So I was really thinking about your comments around segmenting and personalizing. And I would like to get your take on what portions of that you find most helpful. And what I mean by that is we do a lot to like personalize things where we have board members adding notes and whatnot. And we've got a CRM so we can track whether it's someone's first or second gift, but the capacity that it takes to really know that we've got the list segmented, right? So that person that's getting the letter about their second gift, it really is their second gift and we didn't miss one early on. I've kind of shied away from that kind of segmentation because I'm not sure that our notes are so precise to really get at that. So, but I'm curious if there are strategies that you've used that are more, how do I say it? It's like, it's not necessarily saying in the letter, thanks for your second gift, but it's more that like, oh, this person's been around for 5+ years. We're going to send them something that's got a little bit more kind of inside baseball information in it. Or how do you balance the importance of segmenting and personalization with the kind of like real capacity issues for grassroots organizations that I know you know a lot about?
Well, that's like a $64,000 question. It's a really excellent question because we can spend a lot of time. And I did have a client one time who was just fell in love with segmenting. Thought it was the greatest idea that he had ever heard. And they had a decent number of donors, like 3,000 donors, very, very decent number. And he created 30 segments. Like practically every possible thing. You go like what you had for lunch or whether you prefer breakfast. I mean, it was kind of ridiculous. And then of course he had spent so much time in his CRM and setting it up and everything to do the 30 segments and he wanted to do it in time for year-end fundraising so that each segment would get a particular appeal, but he missed it entirely and they didn't even have a year-end fundraising campaign. And he had to do everything in January. So obviously that's the extreme we don't want to go. I think what you want in really small groups, I think having a way to welcome first-time donors. Thank you for joining. We're really happy to have you here. Here's more about us is really like a little even member, those, maybe somebody who are members or have a little membership packet, but some kind of real welcome letter. And then after that, thank you for renewing is fine. It doesn't, it's fine. If you have the capacity though, it is great when people get to be in their 5th and 6th year of giving to actually write and say, you've been helping us and you can always nuance. You've been helping us for about 5 years. That way, they won't 100% remember either, probably. You've been helping us for about 5 years. Just want to let you know what your gift has paid for over the past 5 years. Here are 3 really great accomplishments. And then people feel good about that. Yeah. So I would just have first time all the rest, to be truthful, in a small group. And then though some mechanism, some triggering mechanism where you notice people doing, odd things, like they send you money every so often, it's not entirely even clear why, or they send you odd amounts of money, or they go from, say, $50 a year for some years, and then all of a sudden 1,000. And so some way in which that is triggered and sent to you, and you're like, I'm going to call, I'm going to see what happened. I'm going to, and so that you have a pipeline to begin to pursue major gifts. So you can have as few as 3 segments, really, and work fine. The main thing is to work your segments if you're gonna create them. So Laura and Maureen, question.
Hi, Kim. So my question is regarding, engaging supporters beyond asking for money. So I'm in the process of trying to engage a longtime major donor in a thought process that they offered to do with us several months ago. And they're usually pretty responsive. And I've called them, I've texted them, wrote them a note at the end of the year after we got a major donation. And it's a little awkward because I almost feel like I'm afraid I'm badgering them, or I also wonder, is something wrong in their life, right? Is somebody ill type thing? How would you handle that?
Well, I think, I think you're right to just back off from it, because it sounds like you've done all the ways you're normally in touch with them. Would you ever normally call this person?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you've tried all the ways you would normally be in touch with them, I would just leave it for a while. And then in, a month or two, get back in touch, say, maybe you miss us, maybe you're out of town. Just want to let you know this process, we really do want to engage you. Your other option is to see who knows them maybe better, and ask, is something happening? I think a lot of times our tendency is to think that the person isn't wanting to engage with us, but I think Maureen, I really want to underline what you said, to really 99% of the time, it's nothing to do with us. And it really is an emergency in the family, something, even sometimes that they lost their laptop. I mean, it doesn't have to be a big tragedy, but it could be something that there's no control, but you've done what you can. Also sometimes, I know I do this because I'm sort of enthusiastic. I offer to do something, and then later I just have total, like buyer's remorse. Like, what was I thinking? And that could be the case with this person, and they don't really have the heart to let you down, so they're just like, I'll just lie low.
Okay. Thank you.
But those are, we have this little, fundraisers have a lot of superstitions, and they're probably not based on any science, but one that I have found to be very helpful is called the 3-time no, that I will not hear no until it's been there's been like 3 indications of it. Then I will hear it slightly as not now, and I'll wait, so yeah. Because we do have this is scientifically proven. We do have this thing called a negativity bias, which is our tendency is to go to the most negative interpretation. And that actually is that's part of how we protect ourselves. Like, oh, that bear looks nice and soft, but actually negativity bias probably shouldn't go up to it and try to pet it, so it does save us sometimes. All right, good, very good questions. Excellent, really, really helpful to everybody, those kind of questions. All right, I'm going to go back to, we're going to continue and just proceed into our task for today. Let me get on my slideshow. I always am trying to do this more smoothly and it never works out. So wanted to just do a quick review of what Haley and Wanda and I have tried to recommend so far, just kind of summarize. Very fast. You can see that all 3 of us are very, very focused on relationship building, that this is how you build power. This is how you build your organization. I think Wanda was very clear about having a case, having a really, and having everyone be familiar with the case, so that when you go out, if you go to the Rotary Club, or if you go to a foundation, or if you go just to an individual, you can translate the case into language that person or that institution will understand. But there is an original from which you are translating, and that keeps you from mission creep, which is very, very important. Your fundraising needs to be spread across as many people as possible. I think I said this to you last time, but those of you who are development directors, and some of you are executive directors, and one of your big jobs is development. I like to, when I'm doing that, just sit at your desk, you're doing a task, just stop every so often and say to yourself, could a reasonably intelligent person with a little bit of training do this task? And if the answer is yes, they could, someone else could do it, then ask yourself, why am I doing it? And there may be a good reason why you're doing it, but that gives you a little bit of clue of what work you can maybe move to other people. We have an ongoing, constant effort to help the board understand and step up to their role in fundraising to take on appropriate fundraising tasks. We just talked about the strategies a little bit. Want to move to this one, think about who's a prospect, to really focus your fundraising on people who will give you money. There are a lot of people who will wish you well. There are a lot of people who are like, you go, yeah, that's terrific. Let me know how that, and honestly, they believe that. And we all have that. We all have groups that are number 16 on the list of 15 things we give to, because none of us have, unless you're Jeff Bezos or something, you do not have the money for all the groups that want your money. And I'm going to talk to you more about knowing your donor data, but that of course was a feature that we recommended. Something I really want to recommend, now not everybody loves this, so you don't have to do it. It's not required, but I've had very, very good luck with this, where you give your board members or fundraising committee members or some cross-section of people, each of them has a little portfolio of donors, and each of those donors gets some individual attention. But there's no way that one or two staff people can give all the donors, even all the larger donors or longer time donors, that you can give them the attention they deserve. So this is where the segments, coming back to Marjorie's question about segmenting, one segment I like to have is longevity. How long has the person been giving? And when we look at the three things that we look at in a person, which would be the size of the donation, how long they've been giving, how recently they give, those three things. The most important of those three things is not size, but longevity. If I were down to my last, I had to say I have 10 minutes and I can only spend it on, and I have two donors and I can only spend it on one donor, I would pick the person who had given for the longest time rather than the person who had given the bigger gift. So obviously where longevity and size meet, you have your most dedicated donors. So give out those donors to a group of people. Each person has, 5, 10, 15, depending on their capacity and so on. And that is their portfolio. And their job is to be in touch with them a few times a year. They thank them, they ask them, obviously. So that's at least 2 and sometimes more. They also send little pieces of news every so often. Sometimes it'll be news that will become public in the newsletter later, but it's I wanted to let you, you'll be reading about this soon, but I wanted to let you know. And then they have the sense of being on the inside track. That's kind of fun. They get more personalized invitations to events, and maybe even their events that are specifically for them. And if they know something, there is a saying, a lot of you've heard it in fundraising, that when you ask for money, you'll get advice. And that's really true. And so there's been a corollary feeling that you should sometimes ask for advice, and that would cause the person to give money. I am personally never in favor of anything that is a manipulation to get money. I think if I want advice, I want it to be real advice. I will go to people who I think know something about the topic on which I need advice and ask them for real advice. Otherwise, it feels a little fake. It's a little bit like, I remember getting, it's a little bit like these surveys you get in direct mail. I remember getting one not that long ago from a gun control group that I totally support. I support all efforts to ban and control guns in whatever way, but it was a survey and said, please take the survey, and had various things. And one of the questions is, would you rather, it wasn't quite this terrible, but it was just about, would you rather die in your sleep or be shot? It's like, well, I'd rather, die in my sleep. Okay, if that's the case, then you should send us $50. And I thought, that's ridiculous. Don't do that. It was kind of a survey response and was silly. All the touches, the ideas, they are authentic, okay? And you keep track of, each person keeps track of their connections. There's an organization that I have done a lot of work with called Jewish Voice for Peace. It's a Jewish organization, very pro-Palestinian. And they have 80 some people, at one point they had 88, I think now they're down to 80. They have 80 people who have portfolios, 80 volunteers who have anywhere from 5 to 20 donors in their portfolio. They have 2 full-time staff who only deal with those volunteers, and those volunteers deal with hundreds and hundreds of donors. And as such, they are able to give very personalized attention to hundreds of donors and take a lot of pressure off the ED and some of the other development staff. So it's a system that works. It has to be managed. It doesn't really it saves the development director some time, but you still have to manage it. I do want to kind of also say, when you make these connections, what happens? You try to reach out to people. Well, some never get back to you. Don't take that personally, and you actually never know exactly what they did with that information. Maybe they really liked it that you tried to reach out. You may not get that feedback. Mostly, I think they respond to some things and not others. Sometimes they're more friendly and sometimes less friendly. I mean, really, when you look at this list that I have here, does this remind you of anything? Because it reminds me of people in general. How people are most of the time, the world over. They're friendly or not, they respond or they don't. They contact you when they need something. I mean, this is just life. And so consequently, if you're thinking, wow, if I took on 10 donors, that's a lot. That's, 10 donors times 4 contacts a year, 40 contacts, and that's a lot. It seems like a lot. Remember that at least 2 of them will probably, you will have very little work. They won't respond. And you'll be kind of feeling like you're reaching out into a void. But it's a great way to spread work around. You do have, when you give the portfolios to people, you do need to trust them. You do need to trust that they will actually do that. And you do need to have a way to check in. So this is not, we don't randomly assign this. Also, this information is confidential. And so it has to be people that are not going to leave it lying around or use it for another organization or something. This is a portfolio page I had from a board that I was on a couple years ago, and I'm given. So I've changed this person's name, but she's dead now, actually. But when I was dealing with her, I was given her giving history. So the top part is what was given to me. She'd given $1,000 a year for many years. She'd been involved in the organization. Then she upgraded because the board chair at the time was a friend of hers. She upgraded. Then I met with her with the board chair, and shortly after that, I met with her by myself, and she gave $3,500. So she was a person who, you see in that history, someone who had been, who could have probably been upgraded much earlier and just hadn't. She was very, very active in disability rights, a lot of disability accessibility, making trails accessible, and so on. And she also was a big cat person. So she and I had that, and I think that's why she was assigned to me. So then I have as my personal record. So the stuff at the top goes in the CRM, in the database. My personal record is this other stuff. So I'm just giving you the 6 months of what I did with her in 2021, right? So I invited her. So I find out she doesn't go out at night because she has macular degeneration. Obviously this is more in the height of COVID. So I kind of put down all the things that I did with her. I think the most fun thing was when I told her we had hired this new program person, and then she said that she had gotten a new cat. So that was that's what makes these kind of things kind of fun, is you have these little fun interactions with people. And then my record went on with her, but I just wanted to give you a sense of that. If I need to turn her over, if I go off the board, or I decide I don't want a portfolio anymore, and I need to move her to another person, they will get all this giving history at the top. And then out of the record of contact that I have, I and the development director will simply pull out what are the most important things for another person to know. Okay. So I think in this, what the most important thing might be that her niece comes, I would probably ask her more about, does her niece visit often? Does she often come for a month? That's an important relationship for her. I might put in that she doesn't like to go out at night, but I might not. So most of this will just stay with me. It's not imperative. We're not writing a memoir or a biography of this person. But do keep track of it, because otherwise you'll kind of think, oh yeah, I've been in touch, and months can go by and you really haven't. So do any of you have a portfolio program now? Let me just stop the share and see. I know some of the groups on this, I know Clam does, yeah, has one, and I'm not seeing, a couple people are nodding. And I think this is a really good way to divide donors. So I wonder, actually, can I just ask Laura and Maureen or Pam, who are from Clam, and I know you have a very successful portfolio program. Is there any tip you would give, Laura, that people should keep in mind? Not to put you on the spot, but I am. Or Maureen?
Yeah, I think it's all the things that you said. We really, everybody, there's an expectation that everybody, board, staff, and committee members are all going to have a portfolio of donors. So we all come into the organization knowing that up front. And our two newest board members who joined this past year embraced that enthusiastically. So we were really pleased. And I think just, you know, I was really struck when you were talking in the very first meeting about not everybody giving, and that you felt that was because smaller donors didn't feel recognized and appreciated. So it just made me feel a recommitment to our level of personalization that Clam does, which is amazing. That we write notes, personal notes on the appeals. We make little notepads with people's names and position, and everybody has one of those and writes notes to the donors. And then our donor database allows us to send an email letting people know automatically when we get the donations in.
Yeah.
So it's
And
pretty
that, thank you
simple.
for mentioning that. And most CRMs will do that, so that I would be notified that my
Yeah.
donor had given a gift, because my name would be linked there.
So that makes it really simple. You're not trying to like keep Excel spreadsheets of who's been, you know, it's just very simple. And
But you can see, one of the things is, as you bring in new, now, for those of you that are existing board members, this will be harder, but as you bring in new people, that it is a known thing. If you're going to be on the board, one of the things that you should know is how many meetings we have and this and that. And one of the things you should know is you will have your own portfolio. And I also like that the staff have them too, because I think, you know, we're all in this together, and so that's blurs the line. Thank you.
Yep, and we included that actually in the job description, that, you know, everybody's has this expectation. So it's not a surprise to anybody.
Yeah. That's
Kim,
great.
I would just add that I have found it's really helpful to keep track of, you know, personal information about like children and what they're doing and where they are. And it's just a point of conversation when you're going to talk to a donor, so that it's not just all about Clam, right?
Yeah.
You're indicating you know about their lives and you're keeping up with them.
Oh, I think that's really, really important. And yeah, particularly like kids, and, you know, because that's the thing you can always ask people about. Yeah. So question in the chat, pointers on convincing the board to do this. Well, you know, we really can't convince people. The way I would convince people is to get to see if a couple people are willing to do it, and have them do it for a year or 6 months, and then come back and say, I had this experience, I had that experience, it was really fun. I mean, you know, and then another person will be like, oh, okay, I could do that. You know, negotiate with it. What's the problem? And well, I don't know, 10, that seems too many. Okay, how about 2? You know, try to work with them on that. It may not be your board too. I mean, I spend a lot of time on board, and I harangue on the board, and I love the structure of the board. I think it's very sensible. I think it can work very, very well. But every once in a while I meet a group and I just think, you know, your board, they're just not going to step up in this way. They are perfectly nice people. They may do other things, but they're not going to step up this way. And then in that case, I would create another committee to do it. It does not have to be board members. It just has to be people you trust who really care about the group. Someone says, we've used this approach with congregations for funding for the UWA, including various iterations of volunteers and portfolios. Okay, great. And, you know, any tips that you have, Nori, please share. Can you clarify your records of contact are entered in the CRM or kept private? You know, my personal records of contact with the donors, actually, to reveal my Ludditeness, are just kept in a actually, I was just looking at my portfolio, another group recently. This is my portfolio. See, it's full of paper. It is really not fancy. So that's perfectly fine. Just, you know, I have it in my desk in a locked drawer. I don't, it's not for everybody to see, but that's how I do it. But all the stuff that Maureen was talking about that might be useful to another person to know, like how many children the person has or how long they've lived in the community or whatever, that of course is going into the CRM. And the staff, the development director, those of you who are board members or volunteers today, the development director or your executive director or a fundraising consultant can help you figure out what to put in the CRM and what not to. That's, don't fuss and fume about that. Somebody else can help you figure that out. We use a Google form for portfolio holders. Oh, that's good. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that really makes sense. A Google Doc really makes sense. And that's a really good one. What CRM do you use, Kim? Okay. I am so not going to answer that because if I were to say the next day, it would be probably acquired by Blackbot or one of these predatory companies. There are thousands of them. They change all the time. I mean, I like some more than others. And more, and you know, but I'm not going to be in the business of recommending them. They're just too many, and some depends on who, you know, what it is you want them to know. If a bunch of you want to type in the chat your favorite one, or if you want to type in one, CRM stands for communication response management. No, what does CRM stand for? Help me out. I'm having initial
Client relationship manager or
constituent relationship manager. Yes, that's right. So it's just a database. A CRM is a database. A database is a subset of CRM. CRMs do slightly more than a database, but it's basically a database. You do need to have one. If you have one that you really like, you can type it in the chat. If you have one that you say, run and do not walk away from this one, that's also super helpful. Yes, thank you very much for people helping me out. Okay, so somebody said they like Salesforce. Yeah, that's of course that's free if you can afford their consultants that help you set it up, but it is a very powerful one. Nation Builder, yeah, that's another one that's, I think, operates in the public domain, right? Is in the Creative Commons, and a lot of people use that who do political stuff. Breeze, I don't know that one. Is that maybe specifically designed for church? So anyway, you can kind of read through it. A couple of people are Little Green Light is actually, if I were to just make an exception for what I just said about how I wasn't going to endorse anything, I do like them a lot. I think their technical support is very good, and they're that's a very easy one to manage. So that's one of the newer ones. And Neon used to be better. I think it's gone through some changes. They do go through changes, and more what you see is people develop, and this could be the fate of Little Green Light. I hope not, but you see people develop really good databases or really good CRMs and then sell them. They develop them for the sole purpose of selling them. And either the place they sell them to maintains them, or more often lets them go to in order to promote theirs. And that's been a big problem with Razor's Edge, which is the sort of dominant database. So, all right, so let's go. If there's no other comments on that, let's go back to looking at some other stuff. Wait a minute, I want to go back to just what I was going to see. Let's see those. So this is kind of, that's what I do recommend about for portfolios. Again, experiment with it. You know, you could also start with 2 or 3 people, having a portfolio of 5 people each, and see how it works in your organization. It's not the only way, but I have found it to be a really easy way to distribute the fundraising more evenly. All right, I wanted to give you another chance actually to practice asking. We had a little snafu last week with timing on this. I want to give you a little bit more timing. And kind of the other thing I want you to think about is, I would imagine, I would be very surprised if anybody attending this workshop is not themselves a donor. There's, you know, some 60% of Americans, of people living in America, give away money. I think we have 100% inside that 60%. I would be very surprised if somebody on this call says, I never give away money. If you do, that's then you'll be an interesting person to solicit. So I want to give you a moment to what we're going to do is we're going to get into groups of 2, and we're going to take about 5 minutes each. You will take about a minute, 30 seconds to a minute to tell the person you're with the 2 things you love most about your organization. What are the 2 things you love most about your organization? And that person will then ask you for that organization. So they will work with what you told them. They won't have much information, but they'll just work with that. I want you to be yourself and watch, because I think what happens when we ask for money is we don't like asking, but when we ask people about giving, everybody says, I love giving. I love the feeling of giving. I feel good about myself when I give away money. I like giving away money. If they've been asked properly and asked respectfully, it is extremely rare to have somebody say, no, I did not like that experience. People like the experience of giving, and they do not like the experience of asking. So asking has to be separated from giving. And what you want to do to be successful in fundraising is get out of the role of asker in your brain and move into the role of giver. And basically think, I'm a giver, I give money to this organization, and now I'm going to go out and ask somebody to join me in being a giver. So be yourself. When you're being asked, you'll be asked for $2,000. We're going to make this worthwhile, decent amount of money. And here's the other thing. You can say no for any reason, but you cannot say you don't have the money. You have it. You have it. You could give it, but you don't have to. So you're going to have to come up with some other answer besides no. So Fia's going to put us into pairs. There are a few people that I know are sharing a screen. So when you're in your pair, the person who does the solicitation will solicit you as a couple. Jan, you had a question. Yeah, go ahead.
Could you clarify, are we supposed to be asking the other person to give money to their organization?
To their organization, yeah.
Okay.
You're going to pretend that you're from their organization. So you're going to be working with them, yeah. Yeah. And let's just kind of speed this up and say the person whose first name is closest to A in the alphabet will be the first solicitor. So you don't spend the whole 5 minutes deciding who's going to go first, okay? All right, any other questions before we do this? All right, so Fia, you put us into our pairs. Thanks.
That I reverted to my childhood at dancing school, and I said, how do you do? And Helen at one spit out her coffee. She was laughing so hard. It was terrible. I can't believe I did it.
I think it's so endearing. I absolutely can see myself doing that, you know, when you get the,
I know. He, to his great credit, never said anything about it.
At least you didn't try to kiss his ring or anything, right?
Oh my God, I know. I can't believe that I didn't do that.
Hillary, while we're waiting,
Yes.
real quick, can I ask you a question? I only learned that it was possible for people in UU churches to get some payment or whatever for participating in this program, like on the first day of the actual program itself. I'm in a UU church. I am paying for this myself out of my own savings.
We'll pay you back. We'll pay you back.
Okay, how do I go about that?
Send me an email.
Okay.
I'm sorry, could you do that? Could you figure that out offline or in a chat? That'd be
Mary,
great.
I'll send you a message.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so we're all back. I had a chance to be in a room with somebody myself, which was fun. I sometimes lose sight of how much I actually love asking for money in person. It's kind of because what you learn, what you find out is what you know. This is what I said to you in the very first day is, you know, when you're in fundraising, you live in the world of generosity. You live in the world of people who want to make the world a better place. And they are not perfect people, and you're not a perfect person yourself. So sometimes there's things that are a little surprising, but for the most part, it's just so interesting to see what moves people. So I wonder what any of you felt like you learned from doing this exercise. And particularly, I want you to focus on when you were asked for the money and you thought, I have it, but am I going to give it? I could afford it, but am I going to do it? What would I need to know? So what did you learn by being the prospect that you'd want to remember for when you are the solicitor? Anyone? And you can type in the chat, and again, you can use the raise hand function. All right, here we have a couple coming into the chat here. I found myself wanting some kind of return or power for my donation. Yeah, I think, I thank you for admitting that. And I think a lot of us do. And the thing though, that actually mostly satisfies is real appreciation, genuine appreciation. Your gift really made a difference, not just blah, 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 but actually something genuine. It's not necessarily that people want a tote bag, but they want a nice genuine sense of that. So the notion that, yeah, so one of the things is when people say, I don't know if I can give it all, or that seems like a lot of money. There's a few kind of things. One is when people say to you, you say, could you help us with $12,000 or $2,000 or whatever? And the person says, that's a lot of money. I want you to just say back, it is a lot of money. Don't say, how about less? If it's too much, right? When you ask for money, act like everything the person is telling you is literally true. I have to talk to my spouse. Okay, why would I not believe that? What will your spouse want to know? What will cause that person to want to step forward? That's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. That's why I want to talk to you about it in person. Okay. I don't know if I can do that right now. We don't need it all at once. You could pledge it and pay it over time. So negotiate. We say stay in a negotiating posture all the time, okay? And you learn to do that over time. Someone says, it's interesting to highlight the pieces that inspire rather than trying to check all the boxes. Yes, people aren't going to give because you have 20 accomplishments. They're going to give because one accomplishment really excites them. All right? Any other comments on this? Just looking through here. The other thing is to remember, people will talk themselves, they can talk themselves into the gift. And a lot of times you don't have to do that. You just have to kind of draw out from them what they care about. So someone said the class assumption that, she wants to call it the class assumption that someone could make a gift like this. I think it's sort of, thank you for raising this. I think it's sometimes a little bit fun though to pretend that you would have that kind of money and see what that would be like, because what we want is to kind of think about, if I could do that, but it's still a big gift, I'm not going to necessarily do it. So we just learn about what it is to be a prospect. When you practice though, practice with amounts of money that makes sense for you, and do practice, really do practice. Okay. All right, I'm going to move on now, and you can use, I think it's a very important thing to do this in your board meetings, and, just practice as much as you can. There's nothing to lose in practice. There's nothing's going to happen. I mean, you're just going to learn something, right? So I want to move on now to the final strategy, which is that we're going to explore today, which is legacy giving. And legacy giving is when we ask people to consider making arrangements for us in their will or their estate plan, but the gift itself is received after the person has died. So some people really find this the most difficult strategy because it requires talking about not one, but two taboo topics, death and money. I find it one of the more easy strategies because it requires talking about a person giving you something when they're never going to need it where they're going. By the time they get there, they don't need it. So it's actually, I find that people like it a lot. It's it's relatively easy. It's very, it's a very long horizon. So there's a lot to know about legacy giving. And you don't need to know very much. I'm going to tell you what you need to know, and the rest of it, if you want to learn it, it's fine, but you don't need to. So we're just going to take a little 5-minute break right now. And when we come back, so I have, by my watch, you will come back at 15 minutes after, whatever hour, wherever you are in the time zone world, you will come back at 15 minutes after, okay? And we will start again with legacy giving. Let's just take it is, looks like, are we back? Looks like everybody's back. Okay, so I'm going to move right into, well, if I can, I'm going to move into talking about bequests. I thought it'd be fun to actually just start with a couple very famous bequests. The most famous bequest, probably, arguably, would be this one from Ben Franklin. And I think it's an extraordinary one. You could say many things about Ben Franklin, pro and con, but one thing you could say about him, 1790s, the United States has been in existence since 1776. He really believed in this country. He believed that this country would last. And to prove it, he left money, $2,000, a huge amount of money in those days, to be divided between the cities of Boston and Philadelphia, but on the condition it was not to be distributed until 200 years after his death. So can you imagine what all he had to believe in? He had to believe the country would continue to exist. He had to believe the financial managers would continue to turn over in such a way that they would manage the money and that the money would be held properly. And he did all that just totally on faith. In 1990, then the 200 years was up. His bequest was $6.5 million at that time, was divided between the Franklin Scholars Program, the Philadelphia Community Foundation, and the Boston Foundation. So that's one of the most famous bequests. This is one of the most kind of eccentric bequests, I think, from this guy who lost his job. Was an engineer, he lost his job after quite a long time of doing that work. And then he lived out, he was homeless. He lived on the streets in Phoenix. He was offered housing many, many times. And every morning the janitor would let him into the senior center at 7 o'clock in the morning when the janitor got there. And he would make all these calls to do his investment from the phone there. And how we even know this is because he left $4 million to many charities, and one was the National Public Radio, and they did a whole, and some of you may have seen it, was quite famous. I mean, he was kind of a really amazing, eccentric guy. There are a lot of other fun bequests, but the fact is that most bequests are going to come from people that you don't know, you never heard of, and they're going to be way smaller than that. They're going to be, 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, 500. They're going to be somebody's car, somebody's stamp collection. A bequest is where a person makes arrangements for you, and there's a particular kind of arrangement in their will. And basically they say, when I'm dead, you can have my whatever it is. The thing about a bequest that's terrific is the person can change their mind up until the, even a day or two before they die. If they're of sound mind, they can change their mind and take you out of their will. So it's not, you can't ever count it toward a goal, because the person may change their mind. And of course, we don't also know when the gift will be. We say in fundraising, when the gift is realized, when the money is transferred from the donor's estate to the organization. But you have these kind of in the pipeline. Bequests are the thing you want to promote, because only 40% of adults have an estate plan. This is an amazing thing to me. And I think someone was talking about some class assumptions. This is, I think, a class that one of the hidden injuries of class is the notion that you have to have a certain size estate to have an estate plan. And in fact, the word is sort of unfortunate. An estate kind of implies a large something, a large piece of land, a large house or whatever. But in fact, your estate, each of you, your estate is anything you are not taking with you to the grave. It will, all the clothes in your closet, your bicycle, anything like that, you're going to leave it behind when you're dead. And one of the amazing rights that we have in the whole world, there is no country where this isn't true, I don't think, we have the right to say what is going to happen to our stuff after we're dead. That's an amazing thing. And that only 4 out of 10 adults take advantage of that is really sad. 6 out of 10 adults die without a will or an estate plan. The state has one for you. If you die, what's called intestate, you die without a will or an estate plan. The state says your nearest relative, which might be your spouse or your children. If you don't have a spouse or children, be your cousins or nieces and nephews. Nearest relative to you is your heir. In the event that no one like that can be found, then sometimes they'll ask, well, what were your interests? And they might put it on that way. But, it takes a long time for the state to kind of go through that. What you want to exercise your right, your right to say what you want to have done with your assets on your death. I would really recommend that all of you do that. Many of us postpone making a will or an estate plan because we think it's too complicated. It can be extremely complicated. It can also be very simple. And you can also do it in a kind of half of it. You can say, on a piece of paper, I'm going to give all my books to so-and-so. You can make people a beneficiary of your insurance policy or your secondary beneficiary of your IRA. I mean, a lot of different things you can do that don't require a whole estate plan. I do really recommend that mostly people find an attorney and come up with a will or trust or an estate plan that makes sense for you. It's not that expensive and it gives you a lot of peace of mind. But coming back here to this, that of the only 40%, only the 4 out of 10 adults that have an estate plan, only 8%, a tiny fraction of those leave money to charity. This is going to start going up because baby boomers are the first generation that has been pretty widely exposed to the notion of leaving money to charity. Before that, it was, we didn't talk about it that much. Wasn't so much in the, but now probably all of you have gotten ads from groups or you see in the newsletters and you see it on people's websites. So, but still about 8% leave money to charity, but 90% of the gifts that are made through wills or estates are bequests. So that's the only thing you really need to know about. If you want to learn something else, it's really fine, but start promoting those, because what you're promoting is partly the idea of bequest, but what you're promoting is the idea that your organization needs to be around indefinitely. And of course, this is the very first question that we must ask before we start a bequest program is, do we believe our organization should exist indefinitely into the future? And I think most churches and congregations would say yes. Most social justice groups would say we need to exist further than we can imagine because it's unlikely in our lifetime this problem is going to be solved. An organization, though, if you're an organization that, let's say you're a domestic violence program, I've always, I started out in domestic violence. That's where I did my first work. And I was always am sort of amazed at domestic violence programs that have endowments, because I think, really? I mean, are you basically saying that you cannot imagine a world in which intimate partners don't beat each other up? That's a little weird. But I can imagine a world in which that problem is not solved in my lifetime, particularly my lifetime, which is getting shorter by the minute because I'm almost 70. So I imagine this will not be solved in my lifetime. So what organizations can do is an organization can have an estate plan also. When there is no more domestic violence by some set of standard of measurements, then we want all our assets transferred to some other kind of organization. So, you can accept bequests and you can put them into an endowment and you can have a place for your endowment, even if you think that you plan that someday in the future, your work will not be needed because the problem you're addressing will be solved. I pulled together some excuse me, images from various and sundry legacy societies and estate plans, legacy programs and plan giving programs, and just take a look at those. Just sit and take a look at those for just a minute. And one of the things you notice about them is there's a tremendous focus on youth. You see how many young people, how many young people are here. This notion of this plant, tiny little plant growing. children, is very, very focused on the future. And so the question is of legacy is, how do you want to be remembered? What was so important to you in your lifetime that you'd want to make sure, insofar as you possibly can, you'd want to make sure that it continued to exist after you were dead? There's not I think people fear that talking about legacy is about talking about someone's death. It's not at all. It's talking about everything they loved and stood for and were passionate about in their lifetime, and making sure that all the work they did on it in their lifetime is not in vain, that it continues. You can also be funny. I think this thing from Greenpeace is hilarious. When you come back as a whale, you'll be bloody glad you put Greenpeace in your will. Right? So, I mean, it doesn't, it doesn't have to be all serious and somber. And you can see it's mostly very smiley and laughing and so on. You can also focus on beneficiary designations. A lot of you probably, if you have a lot of you have IRAs, part of what you will have filled out is when you die, who is the beneficiary of your IRA? And so most people put their spouse or member of their family or their partner or something like that. But there's always this thing called a secondary beneficiary. If that person predeceases you, then who gets it? And most of us, as we make will or estate plans, write in the name of an organization there. I mean, some people, if you have a spouse and children, then you obviously put those in that place. But the secondary beneficiary, this is true also of life insurance. It's true of any kind of asset annuity, anything like that. You can name an organization as the beneficiary or the secondary beneficiary. It does not require a lot of expertise to do that, and the gifts are relatively easy to receive also for the organization. So the technicalities of it, I think, are less important than the ability to bring up the conversation. And for me, it's about creating a big space where a person imagines there was a time before me and there will be a time after me. And what does that time after me bring? So you can say, when we think out, 50 years, we kind of think of this. What are the biggest changes we need to see? So these are kind of ways that we can open the discussion. So let's see, Diana, you had your hand up. I think.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you for your patience.
Sure, no problem.
I was curious with the beneficiary designation element. How does that fit into, since you don't know what that person's going to be worth or their property is going to be worth when they pass, and you don't know when they're going to pass, how does that play into figuring you meeting your goals? Or is it just a side element?
Yeah, it doesn't figure into your meeting your goals, right? It will be a fun surprise when it happens. And actually, Diana, I want to kind of applaud you for asking a question, because it is the reason why many people don't focus on legacy, because it's completely unpredictable, right? You don't know, as you said, you don't know what the person's going to have when they die, and you don't know when they're going to die. If you do know, then you are probably going to jail. So that's not a good thing. So it is, but it will happen. You need to get these gifts in the pipeline. And once you start a legacy program, after a few years, it becomes a little bit more predictable that you can predict certain amounts of income from it. We also really like to invite people to tell us if they're going to be, if they have included us in their will, and then we might be able to make some predictions. But it's the most unpredictable of all the strategies. It's both the most lucrative and the most unpredictable of all the strategies.
Is there any need to follow up on it? Like, I guess I'm thinking they could change their beneficiary at any time.
Yeah.
So do you just initially get the person says, I've put you on as my beneficiary, and then you just let it be until?
Well, you keep in touch with them. They're a donor, they're kind of they're probably already a donor actually in real time. They probably are giving you money now, and you keep in touch with them. Many organizations create some kind of legacy society. For example, the Rowe Conference Center has this thing called the Anita Pickett Society, and is named after this woman who I believe was one of their founders. Is that right, Fia? I don't know. Whoever Anita Pickett was, I'm sure she was.
Yes,
one.
yeah, she was the UU minister, I think. So
Okay, so she was a UU minister and one of the founders of Row. And so this society is named to honor her. And people give to the Anita Pickett Society. So when you publicly say, if I say an Anita Pickett Society is in my will, then I get special mailings, and maybe, I don't know, before COVID, I might get invited to come to an event or something. And of course, the more publicly I declare that your organization is in my will, the less likely I am to take you out of it. So that's why we like people to do that. So, you know, you might want to create a society that a legacy society, and then you can have some prediction there. This is one though where you really have to carve out the time and have faith that even at long after you're not even at the organization, this is going to pay off. It's going to be a good thing.
Very good.
So I want you to kind of think about just in, we're not going to do this in pairs. Actually, I had so much trouble doing pairs before. So I'm changing it to be groups of 4. Okay, Fia, that'll be easier. Groups of 3 or 4. What would you need to do to expand or start your legacy giving program? Because I think for many people, just getting started is important. And I'll tell you another thing that, you know, if you quote me, I am just going to be really mad, but you can do this. A legacy program you can do actually a little bit half-assed. It doesn't have to, you can kind of get it a little bit started. You can kind of mention it on your website. You can kind of go gangbusters for a month and then forget about it for 6 months and nothing happens. It's kind of very forgiving. It's like a very forgiving strategy, where some other strategies you really, you know, if you're not going to do them properly, then don't do them at all. This isn't like that. You might want to think about what do you need to learn, but most important, I want you to share with each other, why should you exist far into the future, past each of you, past your own lifetime, should you live to the full extent of your life? Why should the organization exist past your full lifetime? And kind of, let's just take a few minutes and kind of think about that. Fia, will you take care of that?
How long do you want it to go?
Just about 5. Let's just do it for about 5 minutes. Went there. I was complete nightmare.
So it ended up happening.
All right, I'm
Where
gonna
does-
actually, Hillary, do you mind if I put you on the spot just for a minute as are we all back?
No,
No, wait a second.
give them 44 seconds.
40
So-
more seconds.
So real quick, where did the money go?
Well, then the judge created the Marin Community Foundation and said the San Francisco Foundation was not a good trustee. A lot of people lost their jobs. Oh, it's so ugly. And the Marin
This is
Community
such a story.
yeah. It was an
Wow.
amazing story.
It could have made every person in Marin County very, very wealthy.
Well, it could have taken care of all kinds of public transportation,
Everything.
public schools, stuff like that in the whole Bay Area. But
No, she hated it. That's unbelievable.
that's called the long arm of the dead donor.
Yeah, and who organized those people to go out and say that?
Well, some of the people in Marin.
Okay, everybody's back.
Okay.
All right, everybody's back. So before we get started, I want to just ask Hillary from the UU funding program to talk about the Caroline Veach bequest, which actually many of you who are Unitarians will be familiar with, and is one of the most famous bequests in Protestant churches. So would you mind just saying a little bit about that, Hillary?
I'll do a really quick story, and I won't, but there is an analogy in modern TV as well. So a long time ago, a woman whose husband had been a geologist in Germany was widowed, and she lived on Long Island, and her nurse, who is a lovely woman, brought her to this tiny little UU congregation in Manhasset, New York, and the woman, Mrs. Veach, enjoyed her time there. And when she died, they didn't have children, so she left half of her estate, which was mainly papers, and she did not live a big ostentatious life, to the congregation. And it took the congregation a while because there were some papers and there were oil and gas leases that were dated before the Second World War that were in Germany. But I think it was in the 50s and 60s, they finally went over to Germany and began investigating this. And it turned out to be worth millions and millions of dollars. And hence we have the UU congregation at Shelter Rock and the UU Veach program, which has given millions and millions of dollars to Unitarian Universalism and to social justice work as well. And you may know about both of them. So that's why we're here, is the UU Veach program set up the UU funding program to help diversify. So it isn't just white people from Long Island making the grants, but in fact, it's a lot of grassroots UUs making the grant decisions now internationally. So it was an incredible, and I don't know that Caroline Veach knew what she was leaving to the world of social justice or to the world of Unitarian Universalism, but I would say it's the tremendous impact that she had just because her nurse took her to the church.
Yeah.
So
It's amazing. I mean, there's another example of that those of you who are on the West Coast might be familiar with a Methodist church in San Francisco called Glide Methodist Church. And the Glides left a lot of money to a church in a very poor church in a very, very poor part of San Francisco. And they have been able to do extraordinary social justice work for years because of that. There's, you go to almost any sort of larger city and you will find these kind of programs and they have these names. And every once in a while, I just challenge you to say, where did that name come from? If it's not an obvious name like gas station, I mean, if it's a name, person's name, ask where it came from. So I'm curious what you learned by kind of having this conversation. What would it take for any of you to some people are writing in about Veach, so do take a look at the chat there. What would it take for you to either set up or expand your legacy giving program? And I'm very, very aware, believe me, because I have been in your shoes, I'm very, very aware that you are already stretched to the brink and you don't really have that much extra time. But what could you do, or who could you rope into helping you do it? Because if you don't take advantage of this pool of money in 10, 15 years, you will be sad, because you will see a lot of legacy gifts going somewhere else. So anybody have any thoughts, any tips for each other? Yes, Lisa.
Yeah, we're a small organization, but I think, I was talking about setting even a small goal for this year to see if a member of our board can do a little bit of research, report back to us in a couple months, and then to at least make sure that the basic information is on our website and posted in various areas, so that can be a part of the things that we might imagine, even if it's just a small start this year. But if we commit each year to going deeper and committing some attention to this, that it'll pay off in the long run.
Yes, just a little bit. Yeah. So just kind of, that's a great specific example. Just put it on your website, right? Just kind of think, we're just going to do that, which will sound simple, but in the end, you got to think, okay, how are we going to say it? Where's it going to go? We don't want to compete with the annual donate page. So it will not be as simple as it sounds, but it's a great goal. A barrier is not knowing how to explain to people what they need to do. So go online and type in legal language for bequests, or type in freewill.com or anything like that, and just take the language. This language is all in the public domain. There's another organization called CASE, the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education. Probably a lot of you know them. They have wonderful language, and actually their nickname is Copy and Steal Everything. So you can go to their website and do that. I mean, it's just it's really amazing. It's very easy to come across the language that you need. The other thing I want to underline that Lisa, you didn't say this, Lisa, but I'm going to kind of attribute it to you anyway, that you start with the board. One of the easiest place to start a planned giving program is with yourself. Is your will, do you have one? Is it up to date? Does it express, if you were to be hit by a bus, God forbid, you were to be hit by a bus right after this training, is everything in order and does it reflect your values right now? So start with yourself. That's always the place to start. Okay. I don't know. Will anyone support our group? I don't know. Let me start with myself. Will I? Because, you know, we're kind of at a dead end if you say no. But if you say yes, you're already the first gift. All right. Very good. Let's see. Our congregation holds death cafes. Oh, I love death cafes to discuss the meaning of death and preparation, not only legacy, but what you would want in service. Yeah, a death cafe is more about like, how do I want to die? I mean, I just was actually in one recently, and it was very interesting because one of the questions was, would you want to have, there are these choirs called threshold choirs. Some of you probably heard, where people sing to you as you're dying. And so people were like, oh, I would love to have one. I thought, I said to my wife, if you do that with me, I will come back and kill you, because I do not want a bunch of noise. I want to be able to hear myself think when I'm leaving the planet, not be surrounded by music. Oh, God. So anyway, but those are kind of fun things to have, that kind of conversation, right? And then later to think, oh yeah, and what about my stuff? What should I do with my stuff? So these are all conversations we should be having, and I think are actually becoming way more common. Not as common as they need to be, but way more common. Other thoughts how you might start this? Oh yeah, so someone else. Thank you, Pablo, is giving a place you can find the legal language. Any other tips you would say to yourselves how you can expand your legacy giving program?
I see Shelley.
Oh, Shelley, yeah, sorry, I didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, our board kind of made a commitment to, setting up a legacy society this year. And so we are going to unveil it at an event next month.
Ah.
And basically it's just, we've got about 25 members who have raised their hand and said that we're being named in their plans. And so we're committing to an annual luncheon in the summertime, and one other event. So 2 donor engagement events for the Legacy Society. And then just, little touches like milestones in social justice and Supreme Court landmark cases are going to be some of the themes of like postcards that we'll be sending to this little group. And then we're trying to carve out space at like our annual gala so they can have a little reception before. So that they're kind of recognized. But it is, it's a subset of, another circle already, another segment, but like a higher level. And we just really want to recognize them. And we've got like a Google form that they can kind of update every year if there are any changes. And it just got posted on our website just this month. Yeah.
Great. Oh, that's really good. That's like a whole plan.
Yeah.
That's terrific. That's terrific. Pablo, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, just spitballing here, but it occurred to me to get some of our more consistent legacy donors to answer the question you asked us. What do they want to see UUSJ do beyond their own lifetime, and get them doing some sacred dreaming on what that work ahead of, what that work would look like. And if we could get them to video record some of that, then you get a gallery of people talking about the future in a positive way, and then perhaps back into some legacy gift.
Oh, that's a very cool. I like the idea of videoing what they say and maybe posting it. Yeah, that's great. That's great. We live in a society that's everything is what's immediately in your face. I think it tends to be, we tend to be very ahistorical, and this is an expansive conversation. It's actually it can lead to some really interesting and rich conversations. I'm just going to see what's in the chat. I agree. Sacred dreaming is a lovely phrase. Someone said, yes, exactly. I think that's really cool. Someone said, we honor legacy gifts by placing a plaque on our giving tree and have a ceremony before church service to place the plaque when we receive a gift. I think that's great. And then the person, their family or their friends kind of know that, and then they know also that their name will be remembered for a long time. I think also if you really think about one of the rights that people ought to have and they don't have in this country is the right to understand finances. the right to understand the economy, particularly their own finances. And this to me is it's a gift. It's actually a gift and an empowering gift to people to know to know how they can make to know that they can make a difference. I know when I used to live in Tennessee, and one of the people that I worked with there had talked to this woman who lived in this house that she had a well, she had no running water, and she had no electricity, and she lived very, very simply. And from the point of view of an outside person, was really dirt poor. I mean, just very, very poor. And she did go to church, and he worked with her as part of the church. And, I mean, worked with her. I mean, he helped her with her lawn and her, grocery shopping and stuff like that. And she had told him that she had these quilts from her grandmother. So she died in the 90s, and she was in her 80s when she died. And these quilts were made by her grandmother. So they were old. And he said, you should think about something to do with those, but he didn't think that much about it. Well, when she died, she had this piece of paper, and she said, I'm leaving these quilts to the church. And the church sold them to the Smithsonian, where they hang in their quilt display. And it was at this tiny little church, sort of like Veatch. It was not nearly the level of money of Veatch, but I think the quilts were worth maybe $3,000 each. But what was sort of amazing about it is she took him seriously, that she had something of very lasting value that could be shared. And I think that's very important for all of us to think. We made a difference. We have stuff that can make a difference. So really, really pursue this. I think you'll find you have some of the most interesting and rich conversations of your entire fundraising life when you move into this arena of who are you, who were you, and what do you stand for as far into the future as you can possibly imagine. It's just amazing. All right. Do I see any other hands? Because some of you are actually raising your actual hand, and I realized I wasn't looking for it. So I'm just looking here. Someone said actually about Heifer International. That's a really good one. The other thing I really do is look at more large organizations and look at how they advertise their legacy giving, and think what you can learn from that and what you can borrow from it. There's very little that's original in the world of legacy. Okay, so I want to go back. I want to move on now to the final part of our time together, which is about creating a fundraising plan. Kind of taking, all that we've learned, and there's a lot of stuff we haven't learned. There's just a lot more to know, and thinking about putting it into a plan. So these are kind of the steps. They look a little overwhelming, but actually they're not that hard. But you do want to be kind of systematic and create some kind of plan that guides your work. Starting with what's influencing your fundraising now. That'll be kind of your past fundraising efforts, what your goals are going forward, what's going on in the world. I mean, raising money at the height of COVID, before we had vaccines and stuff, was really very different than now. Raising money now, while we still have COVID, but we're kind of in it, but not exactly, is very different from was years before. Raising money when Trump was in office, very different than now. So there's always this background noise. You do need to have goals. You do need to say, this is how much it costs. This is how many donors we want. This is what we need. Otherwise, you have nothing to measure against. The first time you set a goal, it may be kind of pulled out of your left ear. That's okay. But after that, you have a goal to go on. Pick your strategy. Be very conscious about why you're picking your strategies. Who's in our donor pool? Who's missing? Okay. For many of the organizations represented here, who's missing are younger people and a lot of people of color. Your donor base does not necessarily look like your community. So how is that of value to you? If it is, what are the strategies that will reach out to other people? What will invite them in? What kind of how can you make it easy to enter your organization financially? Who's the audience? Do you know how to reach that audience? And then, putting all that into, sort of activities, timeline, all that stuff that we usually do with a plan, and then just work your plan and then evaluate. See what happened. And remember that problems in an organization are just information. Every organization has a problem. If you don't have a problem, you're not an organization. Like when you don't have a problem, it's because you don't exist. Everybody has problems. Some problems are more interesting than others. Some are more hair-raising than others, but everybody has problems. So just see them as information. Don't feel bad about them. Just see them as information and move forward from them. Here's one thing you really need to know is your donor data. We talked about this early on. There's 3 things to really kind of keep track of as best you can. There's a lot of, when we talked about segmenting, I said you could have millions of segments. You can have tons of donor data, and some people love having data. They love having data more than they love asking for money. Okay, that's a big problem because then their data will show they don't have enough money because they haven't been out asking for it. So always deprioritize gathering data and prioritize asking for the money. But if you have time to gather data, here's what you might want to know. How many people who make one gift give you a second gift? That's a very fragile moment in donor history. When they stepped up and they made one gift, you don't know why. Was it because a friend asked them, because they were emotionally moved by it, because it was easy to do, because they got something like they got to go to a movie benefit or they got a nice mug or something? What was the reason? You can't create that emotional circumstance a second time. So what will propel them to give a second gift? Only about 20% in the industry standard, only about 20% of people who give you one gift make a second gift. Only about 1 out of 5 of your new donors will continue with you. Okay, so that's an important thing to know. If you're doing better than that, yay, you write a book. Okay, if you're doing worse than that, figure it out. Then you want to know your retention rate. How many people who give you a second or third or fourth gift give you another gift? And the industry standard is about 50 to 60%. I think for some of you, you may go much higher than that because you don't have 10,000 donors. You have a few hundred. But just to kind of know, if you're above 60%, you're doing very, very well. The longer, if you wanted to really drill down in your data, the more years that a person has given, the more likely they are to give again. So if you take all the donors who've given you for 5 years or more, you should be up in the sort of 80% range. I don't really recommend taking a lot of time to figure that out, but that would, if you have a 90% retention rate, something very, very high, it's because you don't have enough donors. Anyone can keep all their donors if they have 5 donors, their aunt, their neighbor, their best friend. I mean, anyone can keep all those donors. So you actually want to, as you grow, your retention rate will go down slightly, and that's right. And then of the 40% of donors who don't give, who gave 3 times and didn't give a 4th time, that's called your lapsed recovery rate. How many of those people can you recover? How many of those people just lost track of the time, or they went through a divorce, or they moved and you sent all the stuff to the old address, and this could be snail mail or email address, and they didn't hear from you, or something happened. So, and we can usually think we can recover anywhere from 5 to 10%, sometimes better, sometimes much better. Depends a little bit on what caused them to lapse. But that is data that's very, very worth getting. I find that there are people on boards and in and around our organization who love getting that data. They will rather do that than anything else. And that's a task that because I really don't enjoy gathering it. So I like knowing it, I like reading it and report, but I don't like gathering it up. That's a task I've often pushed off on someone else. And that freed me up to go out and ask for money. I'm having trouble. Here we go. So this is just one kind of sample way you could do a plan. Is kind of all in one, it's easy for the board to see this. Obviously your actual details will be different. You can put this on an Excel spreadsheet, or you can just do it in a Word document. It's really up to you how you want to do it. But you kind of look at the strategies, who's the audience, when is it going to have to happen, who's going to lead this part of it, what's the role of the board, and anything else you want to say about it. And for the board, I think this is a really great thing because they see there's a lot of strategies and they don't see their name by every single strategy. So they realize, oh, I see, I'm part of the whole, I'm part of the piece, but I'm not the whole thing. And I found this to be a very useful document way to kind of compile things. So Stephen Covey, some of you may remember him, he wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and a lot of different things. He said that all human endeavor, all human tasks fell into 4 categories. They were either important or not important. They were either urgent or not urgent. And he observed, and I think a lot of us observe this in ourselves, that we tend to live in the urgent quadrant. We tend to live down there in that far left quadrant, and we do everything as it comes up. It's in our face. Okay. Oh, I have 100 emails I have to answer. Okay. And we don't stop to think, what will happen if I just delete 90 of them? What will happen? Anything? Will people be mad? What will happen? Nothing. So, and he really said, live in the important quadrant. Live in the important quadrant. That's where the donors, and from fundraising, that's where the donors are. They're not sitting around thinking, why don't you call? Why don't you text? They're just out living their life, right? So some things that are important are also urgent. Some things that are important are not urgent. But many things that are urgent are not important. That's really the issue. So if you can really kind of begin to reframe, so you just live up there in that top right, top left quadrant, I think you'll be a lot happier. So I want to just take a minute, just a couple minutes. We're just going to do this quietly by ourselves, or if you're sitting with someone, you can do it with them. To kind of think about yourself. What do you, when you show up to do fundraising, you show up for your organization, what do you do very well? What are your gifts? We all have gifts. You all have something you do well. What do you do? Okay, it's fine. So maybe you're not the best, but you're fine. What do you need to improve? And then I want you to pick out of all of that kind of, what are you going to focus on? And you can focus on something you do very well, because that may be the very thing the group needs. That's fine. Or you could focus on something you need to improve. That's fine. But I want to tell you 4 words that I want you to write down, and maybe even write onto your, your screensaver or something like that. These are 4 words that are going to change your life. Are you ready for them? Dare to be adequate. Dare to be adequate. Good enough is good enough. And I think one of the problems I see in people that actually don't last in fundraising, or really aren't very good at it, is they are perfectionists. They insist that everything be done perfectly, and consequently they don't get enough done. For example, and also consequently they feel they have to do everything themselves. So for example, I was working with this group a couple of years ago, and the executive director I think everyone would say a genius, an amazing person, real fireball, but insisted on doing everything herself. And one of the things they sent out a monthly newsletter, e-newsletter. And it was very well done. It was interesting to read. It always had something kind of provocative. She did it herself. She wrote it. She formatted it. She sent it out. It took a lot of time. So when we were doing a little time analysis with her, what is using up your time? Why don't you have more time to spend on other stuff? The newsletter was a big feature. So then we looked at her board. Well, her board has on it all these different people, among whom are 2 people. One is a designer and one is a journalist. And by coincidence, the designer and journalist were both people who didn't like fundraising, didn't want to do it, whined and moaned and groaned and carried on constantly whenever the topic was raised. So I said, well, why do you keep fighting with them about it? Why don't you just get them to do the newsletter? One's a journalist, one's a designer. They could do it. Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't think so. Well, so finally, she agrees. Okay, they'll do this. So they are happy to do it. They are delighted. This is totally in their bailiwick. This is what they're good at. This is what they do very well. So they put out the first issue of it. So, of course, who do perfectionists hang out with? Perfectionists. Oh, God. So, sure enough, this perfectionist ED, her friend, who's also a perfectionist, calls up and says, oh, this newsletter, she goes, it has 2 typos in it. 2, not 1, 2. Oh my God. Oh my God. So the ED, she calls me, I knew it. is a disaster. I've already had one complaint. Well, as it turned out, that was the only complaint she ever had. That's one complaint, the 2 typos. I have to take it back. And I was like, no, what would a normal person say when someone called and said, your newsletter has 2 typos in it? What would a normal, healthy human being say? Such a person would say, thank you for reading it. Oh my God, that's terrific. Are you a good proofreader? Would you mind proofreading it going forward? That's what a normal person would say. But what do a perfectionist say? I think I'm gonna have to kill myself. So, so dare to be adequate. It doesn't matter. Your newsletter goes out, even if it has 3 typos, it's fine. Okay. Even if the formatting is a little bit off, it's okay. You can fix it next time. This is not, some things have to be done perfectly. We don't want our accountant, like, don't tell your accountant dare to be adequate. Don't tell your bookkeeper dare to be adequate. No, they have to do things right. There are certain things that have to be done right. Pilots, when I get on a plane in a couple of days, I'm not going to be like, do your best, bub. I'm going to be like, get me there safely. Okay. So some things have to be done very, very well, but for most things, not. So when you have something in this I do things adequately column, maybe they can stay there. You don't have to move them up, and it's actually fine. Okay. So I'm going to be silent for about 1.5 minutes, and I want each of you to just sit with a little scratch paper or notepad or something like that. And I want you to answer these questions. I do these things very well. I do these things adequately. I need to improve. And this is what I'm going to focus on. And then we're going to share with each other a little bit what we might be going to focus on. Okay, so go. All right, let's come back and see what you came up with. Who would be willing to share? What is the thing that you're going to focus on and why? And remember that I can call on you because I can see your name.
Okay, I'll go. I don't know how to raise the little hand.
That's okay, Mary. I
know,
can see your actual hand, your snail mail hand there.
So I said my problem, or the thing I need to improve most, is I have a tendency to procrastinate and then put pressure on myself and hate what I'm doing because of it. And that I actually enjoy myself more when I manage to start things well enough ahead of time. So I need to plan ahead for all of this. Make sure I'm good at planning, and I'm good at, there's a bunch of things I do well, but the procrastination is a problem. And so I need to plan well ahead.
Yeah. And, I think all of us suffer from procrastination one way or another. And there's really nothing else for it but to get ahead of it. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. Tarn, how about you?
I do well communication. I love to talk to people. I love to listen. I love to learn. I love to help people and achieve great success. Adequately follow up. I probably could do follow up better than I do, just because I've got so many things going on that sometimes I forget to do everything. Not everything, but some of the everythings. I need to improve. I think I need to improve assertiveness. Not that I'm not assertive, but I think I could do it better. And what will I focus on? Results.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And the results you might want to focus on might be out of the answer to the follow-up. There's actually expression, and some of you will recognize it from community organizing. Let's say community organizing is 10% planning and 90% follow-up calls.
Yeah.
Right. And so all the planning in the world without follow-up is doesn't work. But when you know that that's something you're not good at, then you actually set it out. Like a friend of mine who feels like he's not very good at making follow-up calls or doing that kind of stuff, does it every morning. That's the first thing he does in the morning. And then it doesn't sit hanging over your head all day.
Right.
And I have found that to be very useful. I always do the hardest task first thing in the morning because I just, otherwise I'm using up half my brain pushing it away.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Tarn.
Thank you.
All right. Somebody else. Eat the frog. Yes, that's right. So somebody else. All right, you know what? I'm gonna look around for someone who hasn't talked yet and call on them. Let's see. How about Kendra? How about you?
So I think things I do well, I like the big picture, the visioning. I like working with people. I like live people in front of me and talking to them and things like that. I am adequate at like I was like administration, sort of timeliness of follow up. I I hate email. Like I think it's soulless. I can do it. I don't like it. So I think improving upon is sort of like timeliness in terms of dealing with email, which I just think is pixels on a screen. Um, so yeah, I guess so. I feel like in general, follow up to me is also like a thing to focus on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think for a lot of us, that's not, that's not, it's not unusual. If you have too many things though to follow up, when you look at your follow-up list and it's just, oh my God, then you probably want to go back and ask your question, is there someone else that could be doing some of this work? Have I taken on too much? So sometimes that's the question we need to ask ourselves. All right, now I'm looking around for another friendly face. How about Early? How about you?
Hi. So something I do really well is writing and narrative transmission. I'm pretty good at writing in an inspiring voice. Something I want to work on because it's really new to me in this context is the in-person relationships. I'm in my third week as a development person, and
Your
so
third
I
week.
haven't done an in-person ask yet, and it's really scary doing these practices. I'm like, oh, I get so tongue-tied. So I want to try to learn how to do that.
Cool. Well, your third week, I think that's that's okay. And the first time, I did say this to anybody, the first time you do face-to-face solicitation, personal solicitation, I recommend the advice of the Bible: go in pairs. Go with someone else. One of you then can be the expert witness, and you know all the facts and you look very professional and you know the answers, and the other person effuses and enthuses and asks for the money. And it's a kind of a nice, and I know actually some very, very successful people in fundraising who never go alone. That's just their rule. I don't go alone. It's not who I am. And I think that's perfectly fine. And writing, I would just say this, my experience, writing is a gift, and not that many people are good writers. And in the last 50 years of defunding public school education, we really have people perfectly capable of being good writers, but they haven't been taught to be good writers. So really, that's a strength. That's a terrific strength. All right. So now people are avoiding my eyes. Look at that. Oh, I just love you. How about Cindy? What do you have to say for yourself?
I guess I'm the only Cindy. What I have to say is, like Early, one of my strengths is writing, so I like the messaging part.
Great.
But that's also my drawback, which is that I tend to hide behind the words, right? Behind the written word. So I don't have a lot of experience with direct one-on-one asking. And also the things that I need to improve is asking other people to do things. So I have a small board, and I've been thinking about the saying that I learned once from someone in my congregation, do one, teach one, that kind of thing, or learn one and then teach one. So my board's open to doing things, but they're expecting me to come in and train them. So I have to do it in order to pass along and encourage them. And I like the idea of pairs, because a lot of what we're doing at Interfaith Power and Light is very technical, and I don't have that technical know-how, and I'm also not the policy wonk. I can promote that we do these things, but I don't know all the ins and outs. So that's what I'm thinking, is like to pair up with my board president to visit a few people.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I'm a big fan of pairs. I think it's actually kind of in keeping with the world we're trying to build. It's more collaborative, working together. You don't have to remember everything. I find people are very hard on themselves. They come out of a meeting and like, how did it go? I don't know. I should have said this and I didn't say that. And if you go with someone else, they go, you were fine. I thought what you said was genius. I mean, so you get a little bit more feedback there. Those of you who are very good at writing, I want everybody to go out and ask people for money in person. I really do. That would be my personal dream for the entire world. But honestly, if you're good at writing, other people are better at face-to-face, and writing is a gift. So, you can do some of it, but more writing, because those of you are good at that. And those of you who are better with people, you like being one-on-one. You can't, when you think of what should I do on a Saturday, you think of how can I make plans? Who can I make plans with? Those people, those are good at more face-to-face. So, play to your strengths. Play to your strength. I did tell you to dare to be adequate, but I'm also going to tell you to play to your strengths. All right, we're coming toward the end of our time. Let me just see what's here in the chat, if there's anything I need to. Someone said they love your body of work there, Cindy. So that's terrific. Yeah, I agree. Power and Light. I think that's a great group. Jan, how about you?
Before we leave the 4 questions to ourselves, do you have advice about how to make that decision of what to focus on? What do you take in? I mean, I could think of a focus for each of those answers, but I'm having trouble putting it together. So I don't know what to focus on. Maybe you can enlighten me a little bit.
How you decide. I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily think my advice is that good, but I actually try to focus on the thing that I think I would most enjoy learning, or that is most difficult, I most run away from.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that I have found, this set of questions is useful to do in a group, and actually get the group to tell you what they think you should most focus on, because it's actually often different, and you're surprised by it. So, yeah.
Thanks.
All right, so we are kind of coming to the end of our time together. Again, I'm just going to share the screen very quickly. This is all of this is in your in the Google Doc that you have, and that will, and all the recordings. But this is my email address. You are really still, even after the class is over, you're welcome to be in touch with me. A few of you have written to me, and it's fine. I actually enjoy it. It tells me that people are doing it. The participant contact information, let's see. Max, can you speak to that? I don't know how that is going to be shared, I think, right?
No. That
Yeah.
that doesn't get shared because Roe has privacy policies that don't allow that to happen. So
okay.
What you might do is, if you want to email somebody in particular, private chat them in the chat and get their email.
Okay, yeah, I didn't realize. I'm sorry that.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, you could, everyone, if you want to make a list right now, you could put your emails into the chat right now, because the chat gets saved and will be in the Google Docs.
Okay, and somebody said, where is the Google Doc? When you go to the email that you have that gave you the Zoom link that allowed you to get on here, all of that's in there, the password and all that kind of stuff. If you have any problems, you can ask Max, or you can certainly write to me.
Also, you can save the chat for yourself privately on your computer by going down to the little 3 buttons at the bottom of the chat screen, and it'll call up a menu that says Save Chat. So
okay, that's what people should do, because I see that people are typing in their email. So all of that, you want to be in touch, go ahead.
Yeah, it'll get saved anyway, but if you want it personally on your computer.
Thanks, Fia.
Also, I would just like to say thank you, Kim, for doing this. We understand it's your last time doing this for Roe, and we're very sad about that. But we so appreciate it, and all the amazing people. I'm so blown away by all the people who come, because you're all doing such amazing work. It's like you're adding to the good of the world so much. And so thank you, Kim, and Hillary for your funding, and Hillary and Michelle for funding, and all of you. Thank you.
Well, and Fia for doing this. Fia does this for free for
Yay,
hundreds of Roe
Thank you,
groups.
Fia.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're actually going to double my salary this year. So
Well, it's funny because I was just in another, with another organization, and they have this person they're paying a fortune for to do the tech, and it was not at all going well. And she was blaming this and that and the other thing. And I thought, we have this free person who just rolls with it, and everybody kind of rolls with it. So anyway, yes, this is my last time doing this training for Ro because I'm retiring. I have been trying to retire for some years, but I am really going to do it when, you kind of think about where do I need to focus? What do I do adequately, but not, I would prefer to do well. I would prefer to retire well. And I have been retired kind of badly. So I have flunked retirement actually for several years. So I'm not going to flunk anymore. I'm in an A. I will miss all of you. I have loved all the groups I have learned of I've been teaching at Roe since the 90s when I used to go there in person. So it is really a big change. And I really appreciate everyone coming and sharing in the chat and sharing with me personally and sharing in your breakout rooms. And I really wish you go out there and raise the money that you need, because the work you do is so, I mean, everybody tells you this, but it's so profoundly, critically important and very moving. Sometimes when I go to your websites and stuff, I could just about cry with what you're doing and what you're doing with with just mostly passion, not a lot of money and not a lot of people, but tremendous passion. So I'm going to turn it back over to Hillary. Do you have any final thing to say, Hillary, before we close out today?
After however many, 40 years that I've known you or whatever it's been, I want to say thank you, because you have been an inspiration, certainly personally and politically, to me for all of those years. And you are one of my heroes and always will be. And it was so great that you did these, and to everybody who attended, and the spirit that you brought to this, and the bravery of running towards fundraising. Who does that? But you did it, and it's fabulous. So I want to thank everybody, and certainly Ro for helping us do this. And Kim, will miss you. Thank you. And thank you, Michelle, and thank you for working the admin side of it as well. And Fia, I hope we get to see you again too. And Max, good luck. We'll look forward to meeting you maybe later this week.
Yeah, and I just would remind people that I am only retiring. I mean, I'm not dying, so you can be in touch.
Good. Thank you, Kim, so much.
All right.
Thank
Take
you.
care now.